You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارشتايجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to another week of Soccer Today. This week we have some international tournaments going on. We got MLS chucking along, and we're here as always to let you know about all of the news in the beautiful game. Kevin Laramee joins me in Montreal as always. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing pretty good, Wayne. What a game for the Montreal Impact on Saturday night. It didn't end as expected, but it was quite an amazing game. 6 goals scored. Confederations Cup, and there's a UEFA under 21 or under 23. I think it's under 21 tournament in Europe and on RDS. And I'm always confused. Like, so is it the Confederations Cup? Is it the under 21? I'm like, Macedonia. Yeah, that's no way that's the Confederations Cup. Like Macedonia, before they actually qualify for the Confederations Cup, I think Canada will.
There you go. We ran a poll last week asking what your primary interest was, you the listener out there. The overwhelming results was the Gold Cup. So we will be doing a pretty in-depth Gold Cup coverage in terms of the under 21s. That wasn't a lot of interest. We'll probably mention it when it gets a little later and do it with a little more detail. But the Confederations Cup for sure we're going to talk about. And I think today the conversation that's being held in a lot of places is that VAR has made its debut in what, I guess, I don't know, is the Confederations Cup a major tournament, Kevin? I don't know, whatever. It's a tournament that gets watched though.
It's built as an important tournament. It's produced, and the money and the production values and the referee and everything surrounding games is top level. So you kind of have to perceive it close to a top level, at least in the execution of a soccer game.
Yes, no one grows up dreaming of winning the Confederations Cup, but it certainly does look the part, and it gives you your first sort of glimpse of what the next summer's World Cup is. And it's kind of exciting in that way, too, is that you watch and you go, oh, yeah, the World Cup's next summer. And then that sort of gets you excited about that situation happening. But as I said, VAR might be the topic of conversation today. 2 goals, 2 decisions were affected by VAR. The referees maybe got them right in both cases on yesterday, the Chile game. The one goal, though, to me, and this is what always been my issue with the VAR, the goal that was disallowed. I mean, it looks like it might be a fraction offside, but it's still not 100% clear. And the delay that happened for making this call sort of confirmed. It was confirmation bias, I'll fully admit, from my own perspective, because I don't like VAR, and I've been vocal about that on this show. But nonetheless, we've seen it now. There are people that are just now sort of realizing that this is going to take a bit of the flow away. It's going to we'd hate to have a situation like hockey where you have these 10-minute delays where you're pedantically looking over an offside call that doesn't make any sense to you. But nonetheless, we have seen it out there, Kevin. You've always been a little more supportive of it than me, but anything
Duane,
jump out at you?
You're not a big FIFA player, but I am, and just bear with me for a second. And when there's an offside in FIFA, I'm talking about the video game on consoles or whatever, like you see that line, and because it's a computer, right? And it sees it, and you're offside by like a millimeter, but you're offside. And yes, it might be frustrating. It might be tough to show the evidence of what VAR does on just the replays. It's more than that. There's some points of references on the field for the camera, but for measurements as well. And for offside calls, there will be measurements now done to see with different points of view, different cameras, but different points of references on the actual pitch itself to compare the offside position or not, and to see if a goal should be allowed or disallowed. So yeah, the eye test might be difficult, and the TV cameras and the production crew, it's going to be hard for them to truly correlate how VAR works behind the scenes with the camera, but there is more to it than just a guy watching replays and saying if it'd be good or not. And so that's why it takes maybe a little bit more time than we anticipate. It's still like in the rodage, right? It's still like in its working process to work out the kinks of it. So when it's implemented, if it is in the next few years, it might be a little different than it is now. But for offside calls, yeah, it might be tough. It might be frustrating for fans and for supporters of teams when your team gets a goal disallowed by a guy who's offside by a fraction of a millimeter, and depending if you judge his back heel, his front heel, his center of gravity, whatever, yeah, it's going to be tough. Decisions are going to be made that we don't agree with, but at the end of the day, I think it's to take out one of the few things that are bad in the sport is bad refereeing. At least it's to try to soften the impact of bad refereeing on a game, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose. Although I don't think you would call, let's say that the goal that was disallowed was allowed to stand, and there was an argument that it might have been a millimeter offside. I don't necessarily think that people would have been viewing that as bad refereeing. They would have seen that quite rightly as a really, really tough call.
That's true, because it's the margin of error, like a million, like it's tough to just see it. And again, it's always where you see the player too, right? Do you start at his pinky toe, his front, his big toe at the start, or his heel, or whatever, right? So no, of course, when it's millimeters and very small fractions like this, you can't feel undone if you're call against you or for you. But no, yeah, I agree that it stands out too, right? VAR does stand out. It breaks the little play and it gives something we're not used to. And it's not guys running after the ball, it's refereeing and discussions. And we're not necessarily used to this. It does break the flow. And well, we are used to watching games a certain way, and it does break habits for a listener.
Yeah, look, I'm not convinced that this is going to stick. Soccer is a very conservative sport. I mean, I remember, back to the golden goal days, which I thought were, I was someone who liked the golden goal, and I still think that it would add something to the game. But the conservative forces of soccer they refused to sort of wrap their head around the idea that a game could be done like that, right? That there should be a fairness in there and you have to play it out and blah, blah, blah. And then they went to the silver goal, which was kind of this weird compromise. And then finally, they just got rid of it and went back to the way it was, because it is ultimately a conservative sport. It's not direct comparison necessarily, because the golden goal didn't add time to the game, which is what the main complaint against VAR is. Look, as I said, I'm not completely convinced that the sport will adjust it and will continue to have this. I think at the very least there will be some kind of time restraint placed on the replays. No one wants to see a 5-minute delay as they're looking at things over and over again. The NHL, look, the NHL it's at least they've got it down to just the challenges in the NHL where you're not getting it constantly, but it's terrible. Like it's
getting out of hand. Yeah, it's getting out of hand now, especially with the offside thing. with the NHL with the offside thing, and anyways, we're not going to talk about it now, but yeah, you're right, it is getting out of hand, and there's going to be adjustment, and the same thing is going to happen here eventually. In soccer, you will have calls that are not necessarily made to be reviewed at the beginning that will be reviewed, and things that we did review that we won't maybe in the future. And well, we'll talk about it during the Canadian review, dude. Duane, if VAR was in effect in Orlando, well, Montreal would have won 3-2. But that's another topic for a little later on.
Well, a little bit later on. Just real quickly in the hockey thing, it always slays me that they'll spend 10 minutes looking for the most pedantic interpretation of offside, but yet they'll let their players, basically hang off of each other in the neutral zone to tie them down, and they don't call that, because you wouldn't want to get pedantic.
No, you're not reviewing the play to see if a guy hacked another guy with his stick on his face. You're checking if the guy had his toe cross the line first. It doesn't matter if you see something else, of course. But Duane, it's the whatever it takes attitude, right? When it's black and white, it's always ways to interpret it, and coaches and players in situations that could be advantageous to them will try to get the most out of a situation. If that means trying to influence the interpretation to a rule to a referee, well, be it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the world we live in now when the technology is available and so easy to see. It's like replay technology 20 years ago would not have allowed this. You'd saw it on TV, maybe a couple things here, and you might think it was offside. And obviously famous plays like the hand of God and so on and so forth are going to stand out. But by and large, the technology wasn't really there to do this. I'll go back to it again. I recognize maybe I'm a bit old fashioned when it comes to this. I would like to get rid of video replay in all sports. I really dislike it at this point. But Nonetheless, I realize maybe I'm against the majority opinion on that one, and probably a little too conservative. But as I said, I'm not too sure about its stickability within the sport that we follow here, Kevin. One quick last thought on this before I go on. I was reading the Reddit feed on this before I came on, and there was far too many references to this weird rule that I've never heard of on the Reddit /soccer feed, this offsides rule. If you're listening out there, folks, there's no damn ass. Anyway, okay, that's just my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, because you can only be offside once at a time. And
Yes.
the play's dead, so you cannot. Yeah, of course. What if there's like 4 guys offside at the same one? Is it an offsides?
Maybe. Or if you're playing NFL, it's offsides. I get that, which is why so many of our friends to the south slip into it so often. But there's no S in the rule. All right, Kevin. Anything jump out on the pitch?
All Russia 2-0. First game of the tournament on Saturday. It wasn't like an intricate opening ceremony, but it was an opening ceremony. It was more of I would equivalent to like a Commonwealth Games type of opening ceremony compared to if the World Cup is the Olympics. And it's kind of weird because I'm not expecting opening ceremonies in a tournament like this. And now I guess we're getting something, right? It started when? Like, are we going to have this opening ceremony for the World Cup that's going to be like extravagant? That wasn't the case before.
Yeah, I mean, not so much in the past. Well, if you remember back to '94, it's like all things big, they usually start in America. I think that the '94 opening ceremony where you had who was the singer? It was Whitney Houston. Yeah. Whitney Houston took a penalty. It was very poorly taken, but nonetheless, there was dancing soccer balls and lots of American stars and stripes were trotted out there. So I think that that's probably where the evolution came from, and certainly you're seeing it more and more. I personally enjoy, my favorite ceremonies are the insanity that's around the draw, which is just ridiculous to watch. But at any rate,
this year I'm expecting babushka dolls again in the pots, and I'm expecting the draw to take like 5 hours because every time somebody's going to take the dolls in this case and open it to get the coupons and the name of the ticket. It's going to take like forever because, there's a smaller one. There's another smaller one. There's another smaller one. And so it's going to take forever.
In the middle.
Exactly. Like, there you go. Okay, Russia's number A1. We knew that.
Yeah, exactly. That's my favorite, when they have to draw the host team into the spot and they know where it's going. All right, Kevin, in terms of my impression, yeah, that had to be one of the least inspiring opening games of a tournament, but that's really, you can't help it. You draw as you draw, and Russia is the host. So
New Zealand
good for them.
They bunkered down and was able to hold for like 25 minutes, and then like Russia got a few passes, but Russia looked a little better than expected. New Zealand looked like New Zealand, which is close to CONCACAF.
Oh, well, I think Oceania might be a little bit below CONCACAF. It'd be interesting to watch those games. I'm looking forward to watching Australia play for some reason. I'm curious about them in this tournament. I think that Chile, they continue to impress. Are they a dark horse for next summer? Maybe. They've done very well with the back-to-back Copa championships, including the weird one last summer that no one expected, really. Well, I don't know if no one expected it, but certainly going into the final, we all sort of thought that Messi might have his day, and he did not.
Of course, it's Messi's time. And no, we have Messi crying at the end of that day.
Yeah, and then retiring, and then unretiring.
Oh, yeah, that's true. He retired internationally last year. Forgot about that.
Yeah, and then he didn't. When we do a daily show, I'm sure you go back to the archives and find our thoughts on that.
I'm pretty sure we got it bang on. We probably said like, he's going to be back in like a month and a half, and that's what happened.
I believe that's pretty much precisely what we said, Kevin. Right. In terms of the other game there, obviously Portugal's they get her done again, and
all 2-2 against Mexico. VAR was in effect here, Duane, but Mexico 2 against Portugal. You kind of have to feel good about Mexico's chances in this tournament. Mexico, we see them maybe a bit higher than they are just because we're exposed to them a bit more. But I still feel Mexico is a team that, under Juan Carlos Osorio, has found a certain attitude that it's reminiscent of maybe 15 years ago. And they had a little dip. And I think the national team for Mexico now is in a spot where they can pull a win in a tournament like this. World Cup is going to be difficult. There's a lot more intangibles and variables. But Confederations Cup, like Mexico, could do really well here.
Yeah, well, Mexico's had some success. Well, they won the Olympic gold medal. in London, and they obviously they've won a U20 tournament as well. So they've had some success at that youth level. They kind of mirror Chile in that way too. When Chile had some successes at the youth level and managed to convert that. It took a few years longer than I think maybe they thought, but they managed to convert it at this full senior team national level now as well. So interesting stuff to watch. It's good to talk international football in this summer break because it's kind of hitting that like dog days time in MLS where we're exactly halfway through for most teams at this point. So it's kind of getting a little bit of a drag in the middle of the summer when you have so much time to anything's getting wrapped up, but you're well into the season, so you've lost that momentum of the early season. So nice to have a little bit of a distraction for a month or so. It's better than the transfer rumors out there. Joe Hart to United, come on, please.
No. Morata and Ronaldo for De Gea and 234 million pounds. No, that's the rumor. I'm like, really? When do we see trades?
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Well, we saw Josie Altidore get traded, basically, so for Jermaine Defoe. So that's a thing that happened. All right, Kevin, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll have a Canadian review.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back, Kevin. Behind the curtain stuff here, but I switched internet providers 2 weeks ago, and it's nice to not have to stare at the status of our connection anymore.
I like to thank Duane and his decision to change provider, and the listeners would probably appreciate too. Duane, speaking of appreciation, Toronto FC 2 against DC United. It doesn't say a lot about DC, but what's interesting to me with that Toronto game is like the attitude of Javinko, how some of them would call him pettiness, petulance, but still gets the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's got some how do you put this? Some like Italian passion, we'll say. He's sort of as you say, petulant is one way to put it. If you're not on his side, I'm sure that he rubs people the wrong way, but certainly that passion drives him forward and allows him to be the player that he is, which is arguably over 3 seasons so far, maybe the best 3-season run of an MLS player of all time, even, which is, again, when you make statements like that, they sound bigger than they are because MLS has evolved so quickly and so much over 20 years that saying something's the best of all time just really kind of means the best of the last few years. Look, DC is horrific. That's a start here. They are among the worst teams in this league. This has to be, among DC United's worst ever teams ever, and they had one team that had 13 points in the season, so obviously that's going to win it. But nonetheless, 13 points, man. Think back on that. That wasn't that long ago either. That's crazy. Can you imagine that season? That'd be awful. Yeah, I watched TFC for years, and I can't imagine that season. Anyway, they're not a very good team. They've gone over 600 minutes in open play without scoring a goal right now. They've scored in that time and on set plays, but in open play without a goal over 600 minutes, that's a very, very difficult stretch to go through. If you don't score in this league, Kevin, you're not going to win. I didn't think Toronto was particularly impressive, but they did manage to get the job done, the 2-0 win at home, to go back on top of the Supporters' Shield race, 1 point ahead of Chicago. Wow.
Toronto, Chicago. Who would have thought? Well, Toronto, we expected it, but who would have thought that Chicago would be in the run for the Supporters' Shield? We expected them to be better, but they're living way up the expectations now.
Yeah, well, with Chicago, I mean, this is a Canadian view. We're not going to get too much into it. I might actually try and book a Chicago guest down the line because there's interest.
I want Bastian. Let's get Bastian.
Yeah, well, we can make the request if you want, but
we're not even going to get a call back. But anyways,
don't hold your breath. Now, yeah, I think that what I was going to ask is they're pretty much guaranteed a playoff spot at this point unless they fall off a cliff, and that would have been going into this season something that they would have taken in a heartbeat. But now, I mean, are they a Shield contender? They're there. I think most of us probably think they'll slip off, but is Schweinsteiger the difference? We kind of deride that.
Dax McCarthy, but it's not as sexy. It's not as narrative filling to say that Dax McCarthy changed everything for Chicago.
No, but that kind of glue player like Dax, who's he's the epitome of an MLS lifer. He's a little bit more than an MLS lifer. He's an MLS star, I would say, but he's a guy that's played his whole career over here. So we kind of think of him that way too. So yeah, no, those players, as we've talked about many times, are key. But also, I think that bringing the star in has worked out a lot better than we thought it would. And I don't know whether that says something about Schweinsteiger or says something about the league or says something about something. But nonetheless, Chicago with the remarkable 31 points already in the season. I do believe that did they even have 31 points last year? I'm not sure they did.
So. I don't think so.
Yeah, they were pretty low at any rate. It was close to where they had for the output there. Toronto's 32 is more points than they've had, I believe, in nearly half of their seasons all time. So think about that one for a minute.
Yeah, that's pretty. Toronto's having a good season, and you know what? It's been almost in a low-profile kind of way. They're top of the East, and it's like no controversies, nothing too big, nothing too strong. No, like just slowly but surely, they're not getting too excited. They're kind of doing, it's hard to say this here, I'm located in Montreal, but they're kind of doing things the right way.
Yeah, well, no, that must be very difficult for anyone in Montreal to say. And of course, they will view Montreal. That was the one talking point before the game was Michael Bradley blasted MLS scheduling, said that the Canadian Championship deserved more respect than it was getting in terms of scheduling, and forcing them to play 2 games in 3 days was something that he thought was silly. And there's a point to be had there.
Next week, yeah, because next week is Tuesday, the return leg in Toronto, and the first game is Wednesday in Montreal, this Wednesday.
Yeah, so tough times there, but their depth will be tested again, and we'll preview that game tomorrow, obviously. But actually, we might have to be off tomorrow, but we'll figure that one out. Which will
just so listeners know, I do some volunteering work, and tomorrow is a big work day for me. So unfortunately, I'm busy at normal schedule. We'll see what we can do later on tomorrow.
Yes, we'll figure something out maybe, and if not, we'll preview it certainly on Wednesday. All right, Kevin, let's move to your game, the Blast game, 3-3. It's quite the finish in that one.
Quite the finish. Unfortunately for Montreal, they got scored upon in extra time once again. It was quite a nice header, and nothing really Evan Bush could do about that one outside of being maybe 8 foot tall and jumping high enough. But that's something that is impossible. So that goal was unnecessarily impossible to stop. But earlier on, the one of the goals that hurt was a play. It was coming down the left flank of Montreal, and Montreal players kind of stopped playing because they saw the guy running really far down it was the baseline at that point, the goal line, basically. And they thought that the play was going to go over, and the ball did cross the line, and it's clear with evidence, video review, and pictures. But nobody called it off, and there was a center made from there and a goal. And for Orlando, it's a lucky break. For Montreal, it's a goal that actually shook them up. They knew they got done. They knew VAR was not in effect. They knew there's nothing they could do. The decision they made, that they scored. But Nacho Piatti decided to turn things around, and with the help of Blair and Zamali, I think that's the first time I wrote this weekend, Duane. Piatti to Zamali, and he scores. I feel I'm going to say this pretty often from now on.
Nacho man. Yeah, he is a special player, obviously, and when he's clicking and getting those balls in, and if you've got someone to link up with, then they can be quite dangerous for sure.
And that shot by Damali, there was nothing the Bendik could do. Nothing Joe Bendik, former TFC keeper that now plays for Orlando, could do to save that one. It was like 100 miles an hour, right to the bottom of the corner, nothing they could do. And Piatti got great plays, and there were goals out of nothing. Ball recuperation, the high pressing, and I think Montreal's found a way, Duane, to be successful on the road. I think it's the fourth draw on the road this season, and I think it's the 6th unbeaten game on the road this season for the Impact, which is mid-season. Is kind of impressive, and I think they've found a way to apply pressure differently on the road, high up in the last third, to create some. Piatti is really helpful for that, because when he does it and he gets the ball in a advantageous position in the last third, 1 versus 2, basically, he gets the ball against 2-3 players. Well, he's still going to win that duels and get a goal or a shot off. And I think that pressing that Montreal's been doing on the road has been really effective. And their ninth, 18 points, still just 3 points away from Atlanta, 4 points away from sixth spot Columbus. That gives access to the playoffs. I think Montreal is slowly but surely climbing up that table, and they're doing it in a way that is like they're not shaking things up to have like a short-term gain and a long-term dip because there's no plan to the play. There's actually like evolution, and I think there's actually growth in how they're played. They're doing some experiment. They're scaling it back when it's not working. I actually think Montreal is going to climb the table, but once every spot they climb, they're not going to go back down after.
Yeah, and the Union have sort of slipped back to earth too. So the Impact have managed to jump back over them again, 1.29 points per game right now, which would still put them below the red line, but nonetheless, only 4 points back. So you turn a couple of those road ties into wins, and that's going to change things around a lot. And as we all know, this is a playoff league, so it's really about how you finish, not how you start this thing. Vancouver 1-1 with Dallas, another late goal there. Before that, I mean, we've talked about this late goal thing with Montreal too, just to go back to that. Is there something there, or is this just one of those things? Is it just luck, or is
there is
actually
something, but it's not just Montreal. Put yourself in the shoes of the opposition. You do give the last of your energy when you're trailing in a game late. You're putting that pressure. You're trying to you're going into second gear, to use an analogy. You're giving it all. You're giving 110%. Whatever the cliche you want to say. So you put more pressure at the end of the game. You literally don't care about defense so much, especially if you're trailing and it's an extra time and you're in the last third of the opposition. You're going all out. So there's that aspect. There's the aspect of chaos in the box on set pieces. And that's usually how it happens. And this is not Montreal. This is basically across the board in soccer. When you have chaos and pressure applied by the other team late in the game, it gives like the perfect storm condition for a ball to bounce on somebody's head and finds a way in the back of the net. It's kind of how it is, right? So I don't necessarily put a lot of blame to it on Montreal. It's not necessarily because they don't happen the same way. It's all like fluke things, and some of them it's like you get you get break on the counter. Some of them it's somebody's mistake or somebody's great head corner on a
perhaps.
corner. So that I don't think there's a correlation between all of them. I think it's just if you want to defend too much, that's what happens. If you want to feel like you need to absorb pressure, you're already putting yourself in a situation where you might have a goal against you. You kind of have to just play like it's the 10th minute and not necessarily focus on just bunkering down, I guess.
Could be what we're paying more attention to. They have allowed a lot of extra time goals or stoppage time goals this year, for sure. I'd like to, I have maybe somewhere out there we could find a breakdown of most goals allowed, plus 80 or something like that. And I suspect they would be there at the bottom. I remember, obviously, Toronto went through a stretch like that for about 2 years where it's an absurd amount of goals they were allowing in. And you're right. A lot of them, I think a lot of it's coincidence, but after a while, I think you do run the risk of psychologically, you defend too much. You're like so worried about defending at that point that you end up setting yourself up for a fall, and it's hard to emotionally and psychologically get past that. So that would be my worry if I were the Impact. Would be the psychological side of things, not so much how these goals are happening, but how they're affecting you mentally moving forward in those final minutes of games. Because you want to play, you want to play safely, but you don't want to play dumbly, if that's a way to put it. Like you don't want to sit back. You want to play in a safe but conservative way at the end of games. As I said, the Vancouver game 1-1, the late goal there, the Whitecaps quietly, again, they are what they are. And I know that's an overused cliche, saying something is what it is, but I think that the Whitecaps, part of me, I don't know how to handicap them beyond that in terms of they're kind of just around that red line, and they don't seem poised to go above it too much or below it too much. I think they're going to be somewhere between 5 and 8 the rest of the season. And
but I think they're going to maybe be closer to 5 and 6. But I agree with you. But I do like some things that the Whitecaps are doing. On set pieces, that beautiful goal by Teixeira this time around, and that dummy, everything about that play was worked on. And I like more than just how Teixeira hit it, the dummy run before, but the reaction of the players on the kick who sold it. They sold the fake dummy run by moving in a way that two steps right when the dummy guy walked over the ball. So people were expected the ball to come, and then they stopped back and actually went on the actual run and created confusion and space. And the beautiful free kick was able to find a way in the back of the net. And I like that about Vancouver. The skills aspect of Montero, Shea, Teixeira, and others that we're seeing maybe at a higher level than we've seen before, trying to figure out the rest of the team, reliability, consistency, those type of things are going to be important. But I do like what Vancouver is showing glimpses of, like that skill set. And I think over the length of a season, we always say that cream rises to the top, right? The skills and the talent usually raises up. And I think Vancouver does have some talent.
Yeah. Another surprising thing about that one is the other side of the ball. Dallas, we all pegged for a Supporters Shield contender leading into this season, and they may yet turn around and become part of that conversation. But on just 24 points right now, which is not a just so much, it's 1.6 points per game, but it's certainly falling off of the lap. So Toronto fans thanking Whitecaps fans this week for the little bit of help they did for Toronto's Supporters Shield hopes. And I'm sure the Vancouver fans love helping Toronto as they are, because we're all in this together here, right, Kevin? We're all just happy Canadians hugging one another and just hoping that we all just get to the top.
Yep, up until Wednesday when Montreal plays Toronto in the Canadian Championship, and we both want everybody else to not succeed. So, yep, exactly.
There you go. Fair enough. All right. That's going to be a half hour today. We'll figure tomorrow. Watch our social media feeds. We'll let you know what's going on, whether we do it later, whether I record something on my own and we get it out there. We'll figure something out. If not, we'll be back Wednesday for sure. But until that time, as always, Kevin will say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You like what we do? You like the show? You want to give us a little pat in the back, a little handshake, a little high five? Patreon.com is the place for that, in the form of maybe $0.25 a month. And that high five, that pat in the back, help us give you more audio quality, better internet connection, better internet provider, better everything that is working around this radio show, Sport Podcasting Network. With your help, we can even do more. They always say that alone you go fast, but together we will go far. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.